Good afternoon, everyone. Although we're gathered from different places today, we gratefully acknowledge the Native peoples on whose ancestral homelands we gather, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. Well, again, good afternoon. My name is Nicole. I'm a gallery educator at the National Portrait Gallery. And today, my colleague Erin has an amazing program lined up for you. Learning all about the voices of social justice within the United States. Before we begin, I'd just like to go over some technical directions. Today, this is a very interactive program and we would love to hear from you. And the best way to do that is through the chat. So if Erin has any questions for you, or if you have any questions for Erin, please drop those in the chat and I'll do my best to make sure that we cover all of those questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Erin to get us started.
All right, thank you, Nicole. So as Nicole was saying, my name is Erin, and I'm also a gallery educator at the National Portrait Gallery. So today we are going to have a program called Voices of Social Justice. And I'm going to start off by sharing my screen. What you're seeing here is our Smithsonian Learning Lab. I think in a little bit, towards the end of the program, Nicole will drop a link for the Learning Lab so that you all can take a look in more detail in here. But if you were coming to a program in person at the gallery, the first thing you would see is the exterior of our building, which looks like this. Now, our building was originally built in the 1830s and 1840s, and it was originally made to house the US Patent Office. It didn't actually become a museum until 1968. So if you were on an in-person program, it would take you into the courtyard from here, and the courtyard looks like this. So I know that we're not in person and it probably feels a little bit different to you, but I was wondering if in the chat you could share a word or two to describe this space, what you think of this space.
All right, well, Erin, words are coming through in the chat. Many students agree that it looks very, very open and cool. One student says, wow, in all caps. Perhaps it's quiet, very fancy, green, large, angelic. Oh, these are
Angelic,
wonderful
goodness.
words. Yeah.
Yes. All right, so those are all really wonderful words. Thank you for sharing them. It is a really large space. You got that right, for sure. It's about half the size of a football field. Now, originally, this was an outdoor space, but in the early 2000s, the museum underwent a whole renovation, and they added this glass roof. And it's really nice because it is glass, so it lets a lot of light in, and it's a wonderful place to stop and just rest in between looking at artwork or have lunch. And as you can see, there's a lot of people doing that in this photograph. Now, the mission of the National Portrait Gallery is to tell the story of the United States through the people who have helped shape it. And we do that by sharing portraits. And these portraits, they give us information and they tell us a story about these sitters. Now, I just used two terms that I want to make sure we're all on the same page about before we move forward. The first one is portrait. In the chat, can you share with me what you think a portrait is or what the word portrait reminds you of?
Right. Kimberly says a painting. Yeah, a painting is definitely a portrait. Oh, and they're
Absolutely.
flying through. It could be a picture of a person, as Lisa suggests. It could be like the Mona Lisa. Well.
Yeah, that's definitely a portrait. Okay, those are excellent responses. That's exactly right. A portrait is an artwork it's a likeness of a person. So every portrait that we look at today is going to have at least one person in it. All right, and then the other term I used was sitter. Now, the sitter is the person in the portrait, and we call them a sitter whether they are sitting or standing or running or jumping or swimming. It doesn't matter what they're doing. We always call them the sitter. So I wanted to show you this image because it also shows us the artist. So here we have the artist. This is Joe Davidson. And this is our sitter, Gertrude Stein. And this is the portrait. Okay, great. So the National Portrait Gallery has over 20,000 portraits in its collection. Today, we're going to look at maybe 3 or 4 because we're going to be together for about 30 or 40 minutes. And each of these portraits has to do with social justice. So in the chat, I would like for you to type what you think justice is. What is justice?
Okay, so coming through in the chat, we have students mentioning justice is freedom. It is a right, equality. Students are thinking about, yeah, justice and rights. Standing up for those rights.
Yeah, excellent responses. Perfect. Okay, so justice is about equality and fairness and rights. So what is injustice? And you can type what you think injustice is, or if you have specific examples of injustices that you think people might be dealing with, you could type those in the chat.
All right, so responses that are coming in for injustice, we have students saying, you know, being mean, just frankly not equal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
not freedom. A lot of kind of the opposite.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. All right. How do people fight injustice in the United States? How do people work against injustice to make things more fair?
There's wonderful comments coming in. Students are saying, you know, protests or marches.
Excellent.
Speaking your mind as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Using your voice, protesting, voting, right? So these are all excellent examples of how people fight injustice. So as I was saying, we're going to look at these portraits about people who fight injustice. And we're not just going to look at these portraits, we are going to read these portraits. Okay, so when I say read, what I mean is that we're going to look for elements or clues that the artists give us to tell us more about that sitter. Okay, and those clues or elements are the elements of portrayal. So we might look to clothing or hairstyle to figure out what time period a sitter is from. Or we might look at the setting, or sometimes we call it the background, and that will tell us where that person is or maybe where they're from. Facial expression can tell us how they're feeling or what the mood is of the portrait. Color's important. Objects are they can be symbols for things that a person likes or something significant in their life. And then you might have noticed that we have these 2 words here, medium and scale. So scale is about the size of the portrait. If it's very tiny or very large, or sometimes we say a portrait is life size, if it's about the size of the person in the portrait in real life. Medium, though, has nothing to do with size in portraiture. Medium is the material that a portrait is actually made out of. So that image I showed you just a moment ago, the medium, the artist was using clay to make that portrait. And one of you mentioned earlier that a portrait can be a painting. So paint can also be a medium. In the chat, can you type any other mediums you can think of or materials an artist could use to make a portrait?
All right, it sounds like we have a group of artists today. Wood, clay, paint, chalk, sand, charcoal, as Adrienne
Those are
mentioned.
great ideas. Yeah, so any of those would work, right? And we have a portrait in the National Portrait Gallery that includes rice even. We have some that are made from videos. Have you ever taken a selfie? I bet most of you have. A selfie is a portrait, and that uses a camera. And we call those self-portraits because you take it yourself. All right, so I'm going to show you our first portrait in just a second. But when we look at that, we're going to do something called a 30-second look. What I would like for you to do is think of all of these elements: facial expression, pose, clothing, hairstyle, setting, the color, objects you might see, okay? And you're gonna see where you find those elements in this portrait, and you're gonna memorize them. I'm gonna give you 30 seconds to look very closely, and at the end of 30 seconds, I'm gonna hide the portrait, and I'm gonna ask you a bunch of questions about it. All right, everybody ready? Here we go. Starting now. About halfway through. All right, and we're there. Okay, so before you start typing things in the chat, I can see a few of you already started. I want to ask you the questions, all right? What color is the couch?
Right, we have a really smart group of students. They all remember that couch being blue.
All right, great, blue. What about the curtains? What color were the curtains?
All right, red or purple, perhaps maybe even maroon.
Excellent, looking very closely, I can tell. What about the walls?
Right. Most students are in agreement that the walls could be white or beige or maybe even a lightish blue.
All right. How were the sitters posed? Pose is about their body positions. How were they posed?
Right. Some are sitting on an angle, as Caitlin mentions. Most of them are sitting, some of them are standing as well.
Yeah.
Very sophisticated too.
Oh, that's a good descriptive word, sophisticated. Great. Okay, so we have a couple sitting and we have a couple standing. Very good. How would you describe their facial expressions?
Okay, some students are saying, serious, perhaps mad. On the flip side, some say, happy, determined. That's a really excellent word, Lisa. Yeah, smiling, but not smiling. Maybe, maybe this hidden happiness, or neutral, as Adrian mentions.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so we've got a whole span of facial expressions here, all the way from serious to happy and smiling and somewhere in between. Great. Okay, what objects did you notice?
Okay, many students are in agreement that they remember seeing books in the portrait, a mirror as well, plant pots. Great eyes there.
Wow, very close looking.
A couch, perhaps a dresser, and a pillow on that couch.
Yeah, all right. Okay, you got all the objects that can think of. What about this setting? Can you tell where our sitters are located?
Right. So a lot of students are in agreement that it could be a living room or a library, kind of in an inside space. Carmen's taking us in the direction of the government, saying maybe perhaps these women are in the Senate or another government building.
Oh, that's interesting. So, Carmen, I'm curious why you said the Senate or a government building. What did you see that made you think government in the setting?
Right. And while we're waiting for that response to come in, there's a lot of other students saying that this is a place of power, maybe a church or an office.
Okay. I think that's a really great observation, right? So it seems like it's a very sort of fancy, formal space, I think we could say. Okay. What about their clothing? How would you describe what they're wearing?
Right. So their clothing is dark, perhaps black or purple. They look like dresses or judges' robes. Yeah, they're looking like they work at a courthouse.
Okay, excellent. So my next question for you was going to be, can you tell what their job is based on what they're wearing? But you went there before I even asked. So excellent, excellent job. Yeah, they're wearing these black judges' robes. All right, I'm going to show you the portrait again. That was fun. Thank you for responding so quickly. And here we go. Okay, so you all noticed, or many of you noticed, the blue couch and the red curtains and the white walls, right? And the walls are kind of an off-white, but we also see white in the collars that these judges are wearing, right? Why do you suppose the artist would include these three particular colors? What does he want us to know about these women?
All right. So yeah, these students are getting it right. Yeah, that they're from the United States of America.
Yeah, they're American women. Okay. And we also talked about what they're wearing, which are judges' robes, right? These women are Supreme Court justices, which means they are judges on the highest court in the United States. And they help determine if things are constitutional, if they're legal or not. And we see them all here together in this one room. So, and some of you had already guessed this, but it looks like they're in some sort of official building, right? And it does look like maybe the Capitol or some other government building. It's supposed to be part of the Supreme Court, a room where they all gather. And some of you also pointed out these books right here. And if we look closely in the mirror, we see some more books back here. Why do you think the artist would include these books? What does he want us to know by including those?
All right. So students are in agreement that these books are there as a symbol of intelligence, that they're smart. Even taking it a little further, saying that these are law books.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. I think that's accurate. I think that's right. These books tell us that these women are very well educated, and they would have to be members of the Supreme Court. You have to be very well qualified to get that particular job. Now, in our history, in this nation, we have had 115 Supreme Court justices in our entire history. Out of those 115, how many do you think have been women?
Okay, so students are responding. It could be perhaps anywhere between 45 to maybe 60. Some say, not many. Annika hits it right on the head with 5.
Excellent. So I can see why some of you would say like maybe 50 or 60, right? Because if we've had 115 justices, women make up about half of the population. It would be reasonable to think that they would make up about half of the Supreme Court. But we've actually only ever had 5 women serve on the Supreme Court out of 115. So we've had these 4. This is Sandra Day O'Connor. This is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This is Sonia Sotomayor, who you might have seen this afternoon if you watched the inauguration. She actually swore in Vice President Kamala Harris. And this is Elena Kagan. We don't see the 5th woman, Amy Coney Barrett. She was recently appointed to the Supreme Court, and this portrait was made before she joined. So my next question for you is, why have there only been 5? What do you think?
Right, I think students are thinking on this one, Erin. I'll let you know as they come in. Oh, I think they just need some time to type.
Yeah.
So because women didn't get equal rights, maybe it wasn't until much later, patriarchy, inequality, going back to our kind of our theme of injustice. Some students are saying, people think maybe girls are not as good as boys, and women didn't always have the right to vote.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So those are all excellent responses, and all true. These women faced a lot of discrimination. This woman right here, Sandra Day O'Connor, and here Ruth Bader Ginsburg, they were the first women to join the Supreme Court. And it's kind of interesting how the artist posed them on the couch in front of these the 2 other women that joined later. Like they blazed the path. They opened up these possibilities for the women to follow them. But why do you think it would be important for women to be on the Supreme Court? Why does that matter?
Right. Let's see. Responses are coming in to have better representation and to really kind of show or to maybe have a greater perspective on women's rights and experiences. One student, Olivia, says it really, really nicely that, there needs to be a female point of view. Really like that.
Yeah, so these are all really great responses, right? Having women on the Supreme Court provides another perspective, right? And perspective is really important. And there are many, many, many diverse perspectives to be had in the United States. And since this court is one that makes so many decisions for people within the nation, it's important to have all of these diverse perspectives represented. Okay. Excellent. So I want to move on to our next portrait, and our next sitter actually has a connection to the Supreme Court too. All right. Before we get into that story though, I want to take a moment to look closely at the elements here. So we're going to do something called 10 times 2. Now, as you're looking at this portrait, I want you to notice all of the elements that we've been discussing. So things like facial expression and pose and color and setting. And I want you to type 10 words into the chat that just make an impression on you, that kind of describe what you're seeing here. All right. And then I'll give you a couple of seconds. And when I say hit send, just hit send on all 10 at once. So go ahead and take a moment. All right, why don't you go ahead and hit send. If you don't have all 10 words, it's okay. Share what you have.
There's some excellent words coming in. Erin, do you want me to start reading them out?
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay. We have protest, shock,
Ooh.
kind of comic book style, indigenous, bold, hopeful. A lot of students are looking to the colors, seeing red, black, Blue, sacred, civil rights, inspiring equality, kind of wanting rights, legend, historical, empowering, ready for war, injustice, thought provoking.
Goodness. So these are great. There's so many things that you all came up with. I'm so impressed. Okay, so remember, this is called 10 times 2. So what I'm going to ask you to do right now is dig even a little bit deeper and write 10 more words. And I'll give you a few seconds to do that, and then I'm going to ask you to hit send again. All right, now you go ahead and hit send. And if you don't have 10, again, it's okay. Just send what you have.
Right. So with this second look, a lot of students discovered the text here. So really reading off what they saw there. Medicine Man, we are still here. Even a year, 1977, and then really dived in more towards Crow Dog's face in saying it was hopeful, determined, needs a voice, maybe shocked or expectant. And then also there's a really good one here talking about the font that it looks like it's made from a stencil.
Okay, so these are all really excellent observations too. And I'm glad that you kind of focused in on the words, because I was saying earlier that we're going to read the portraits using the elements of portrayal. But in this particular portrait, we can literally read the words that the artist has given us. And we see Crow Dog really large right here, right? It's very much emphasized. It's this bright red against this yellow, and the lettering, the font, as you'll notice, this is larger than the font anywhere else that we see on this portrait. Now, why do you think he would emphasize Crow Dog?
Okay, so students are thinking about, how this name might relate to Indigenous roots.
Excellent.
Let's see, and then students are thinking, maybe this is the name that he's known for. Could possibly be the sitter's last name, and the name of the person in the portrait.
Yeah, exactly. Those are all great responses too. I'm so impressed. So yeah, his last name is Crow Dog. This is Leonard Crow Dog. He is the Lakota man from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. And names are a really significant thing, aren't they? So if you are thinking about your own name or your own nickname, you might be thinking about all of the stories or the history behind your name. How did you get it? What does it mean? What does it say about who you are? And for Crow Dog, there's a lot of history in this one particular name. Now, Leonard Crow Dog, what he says about this name, he says, "I am Crow Dog. I am the fourth of that name. Crow dogs have played a big part in the history of our tribe and in the history of all Indian nations of the Great Plains during the last 200 years. And we are still making history." Now, remember that I told you this portrait has a connection to the Supreme Court. When Crow Dog says that his family has been making history that's impacted all of these people for the last 200 years, he is not exaggerating. His great grandfather, the first Crow Dog, he took a case all the way to the Supreme Court. It's called Ex parte Crow Dog. And this case was about something called tribal sovereignty. In the chat, I'm wondering if you could tell me what you think sovereignty is, or what does that term remind you of? What do you think?
Okay. Some students are thinking that it relates to kind of justice, or, oh, this is a really great response, the power of a tribe to make their own laws and rules.
That is fantastic. That's exactly what it is. It's the right to self-govern. It's the right to make your own laws and your own rules. It's the right to determine your own religion and your religious practices. It's the right to decide who's a member of your community and who's not. All of these things. And Leonard Crow Dog's great grandfather brought this case all the way to the Supreme Court. And guess what? He won. He didn't just win, it was a unanimous decision. It was 9-0. Every single justice on the Supreme Court voted in his favor. And at that time, it was in favor of tribal sovereignty. Now, shortly after that, it became illegal for many Indigenous peoples to practice their traditional religions. And Crow Dog's grandfather and father worked against that very hard, and they continued to practice their religion despite that law, and they continued to teach it to younger generations so that it wouldn't get lost. And they taught it to this person that we're seeing on the screen, Leonard Crow Dog. And as you notice, it says medicine man right here, and he continues to teach young people and hold ceremonies about this religion now. Some of you also noticed these colors, and the colors have pretty significant meaning too. We see yellow and red, as you noticed, and the white and the black of his hair. And these colors are all very significant because they're the colors of the flag of the American Indian Movement. And this organization has organized many protests and many occupations of buildings and spaces and things like that, in an effort to fight for tribal sovereignty. So I don't think Crow Dog is done making history. I think that this name is going to continue on, and we'll hear more of it in the future. I have one more portrait to show you. We're going to jump forward in history now. And here it is. In the chat, I'm curious, what differences do you see between this portrait and the two portraits you saw just before? So Leonard Crow Dog and the four justices. How is this one different? Think about all those elements we've been discussing.
Right, we have some experts in reading portraiture. A lot of students are looking to the medium here and noticing that it's a photograph and not a painting or a poster. Some are mentioning that this looks like it's, a different fight for justice, perhaps Black Lives Matter. There's more people in this portrait. Also, let's see, the students saying this is based off of real or contemporary events. It's outside. And let's see, yeah, a lot of
that's a lot of great observations.
Contemporary moments.
Excellent. Okay, yeah. So the medium, to start with, the medium is very different. So the first portrait that we saw of the four justices was an oil painting, and then the Crow Dog portrait was a poster, and this is a black and white photograph. Now, another difference that you might have noticed is that this one is candid. It's in the moment. Like, our sitters are not posed intentionally here for a photograph necessarily. When you think of the four justices, they were all very, serious, and one of you even said sophisticated. And then with Crow Dog, we saw that he was very intentionally posed. We were like looking up at him, and he's a leader. And here we see these young people, and they're in action, and they're protesting. What do you think they're protesting?
Well, Erin, there were a few more differences that were really excellent that were
Oh, go
pointed out
ahead, share
earlier.
them.
So I want to make sure that those are shared out.
Yeah.
Olivia mentions that these people look really young in this portrait. So thinking about what they're fighting for, perhaps it's racism or another movement that, or Black Lives Matter, a movement today. Um, so most students are in agreement that these students are maybe fighting for Black Lives Matter, or poverty or police brutality to stop.
Those are all great guesses. And we have a couple of hints here about what they're protesting, but it's kind of hard to see. So we see that they're wearing these shirts that say "Good Kids, Mad City." But we can't really, beyond that, we don't see too many clues about what specifically this is. But I know. So um, this is actually a protest that was organized as part of the March for Our Lives organization. It happened on March 24th in 2018 after the Parkland school shooting in Florida. So these students all got together and organized these protests against gun violence in schools and to advocate for stricter gun control legislation. Now, are you able to tell where this protest is located based on what you're seeing here?
Right. So students are unclear about exactly where it is, but it could be a big city.
Yeah, exactly. So we know it's a big city. We can see this building back here, right? And these protests happened in several large cities across the US. They happened in DC, they happened in LA and in Phoenix and all over the country. This particular one was in Chicago, which I thought, I think that we have some students with us from Chicago today. So these students in this photograph were actually students in a public high school in Chicago. Now, this photographer, her name is Sandra Steinbrecher. This is a portrait that she entered in a contest that the National Portrait Gallery holds every 3 years called the Outwin. And actually, if you all are going to be 18 pretty soon, we're in the middle of accepting submissions for the next Outwin. So, but if you can't enter a portrait this time, maybe in 3 years you'll be able to submit a portrait. But this portrait was one of the winners. It was chosen among about 50 others out of about 2,400 portraits that were submitted to the National Portrait Gallery. And I'm curious why you think the judges would choose this portrait. Why would they want to include this portrait to hang in the National Portrait Gallery?
Okay, so some are looking to the composition, thinking about it as a work of art and the relevance to contemporary or modern events. Also, that it teaches people. I really like that comment. Just yeah, spread awareness and show that kids have rights too.
I really like that comment that it teaches people, because it really it does. It brings up conversation, and I think that's one of the things that the judges liked about this is that it shows these young people who are the future of our nation using their voices and actively participating in our democracy and fighting against injustice through protest. So that's wonderful. And just to continue on with that, so Sandra Steinbrecher, the photographer, she's been interviewed several times about this image, and she said, that she likes to focus on documenting events where young people are being active and where they're doing things like this because she feels that young people are able to do things that adults can't. And we see this here. We see their facial expressions. They're very determined and very serious. When this portrait came to the National Portrait Gallery, the photographer didn't actually know any of these students. So she ended up trying to find them. She posted this picture on a lot of social media, and she was able to connect with these students. And when they found out that this portrait was hanging in the gallery, this young man right here, he was really excited about it, but he said, you know, I wish that I would have known, because I would have done something better with my hair or spent more time getting ready that morning. But regardless, it's a very powerful photograph. Okay, and we are just about out of time, but if you could just take a moment and share in the chat which of these portraits you enjoyed looking at the most, I would really appreciate it. So this one is called Frontline, and then we had Leonard Crow Dog, and we had the Four Justices first.
Right, and while I'm waiting for responses to come in the chat, I just wanted to let you know that I put a link so you can learn more about the portraits that Erin discussed today, as well as many others within our museum's collection relating to social justice. All right, there are a lot of students who say Frontline March for Our Lives is their favorite. We have several who say Crow Dog and Four Justices, and some saying all three.
Well, great. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you all for joining us.